My name is Justin DeClue, and I'm here today with
Will Sloan.
And today, we're talking about everyone's favorite satirical award ceremony, the Razzies. Right, Will?
Specifically, we're talking about a collection of films that is on the Criterion Channel right now. If you go to the main page, you'll see that they have a selection of movies called And the Razzie Goes To that brings together not exactly the best of the Razzies, not exactly the worst of the Razzies either.
Whatever Criterion had available.
Yeah, so, okay, first things first, I think that this is not a very well-curated selection of movies. It's basically a mix of movies that have either been reclaimed by film Twitter as actual good movies, or sort of kitschy, not very good stuff that has movie stars that people like. Would you say that's fair?
What, are you saying that Geely hasn't been reclaimed by film fans as something that actually has value?
Has it? You've actually seen it recently.
No, it's terrible. It's never going to be reclaimed. It's basically a movie that is only remembered by the people that were at a very specific age when that film was being released. Other than that, it should completely blasted off of, history's memory, because who cares?
Also in the collection is the 2002 Madonna vehicle, Guy Ritchie's Swept Away. You've seen that one, right?
Terrible. Yeah, terrible movie. No one's reclaiming that one either.
Yeah, so some stuff like that, and including one of the movies that we're going to talk about on this episode. But then there are also movies in the collection, and frankly, I wish it had just focused on stuff like this. Movies that are actually good, or if not, or maybe some might disagree, but movies that you can make a case for, movies that are interesting, movies that seem to be chafing against the received wisdom of whatever eras they came out in.
And if you don't know what the Razzies are, and
lucky you,
I think you're doing the right thing, because this is a just don't look style situation. Even though they've been going on since 1981, which means that they are 42 years old at this point.
Yeah, and I assume they have all the same voters that they had back then too. I mean, yeah, I feel a little bad doing this episode just because, you shouldn't, like you say, be like Paul Anka, just don't look.
But nope, it's on Criterion. Listen, we want to ride those coattails, give us an excuse of something that people will click on. And the Razzies, again, for people of a particular age, I feel is an attraction because they know what that is. Even though that every year as it comes up, people go, what, this still exists? Why are we still talking about this?
And also there are places like, The Hollywood Reporter or whatever that'll just, report on it in
as if it's just like a
fashion,
like legitimate event that we're actually interested in whatever they will pump out. I mean, we'll talk about the Razzies in the sense that there could be something interesting that they do, but it's not. It's just not interesting.
Yeah. And I think that looking at the Razzies in maybe the 80s or 90s, which are the Razzie heyday, are probably useful insofar as looking at the Oscars from those decades are, just in getting a sense of what the ambient wisdom of the times was. Like today, I don't think the Razzies even serve that function, because did you see who won this year?
No.
So this year they gave Worst Actress and Worst Supporting Actress to, drumroll please, Megan Fox.
Megan Fox?
I know. So this'll tell you.
Wait, are you sure this is not 10 years ago, the Razzie Awards?
And Worst Supporting Actor, Sylvester Stallone, yet again.
From Expendables 4.
Yeah, so it's not even, there is no zeitgeist that this is appealing to anymore. But I would say...
Now, this feels like we don't want to insult anybody kind of award ceremony.
Yeah, it has no point of view, but I think that it feels like if you look at the Razzies in the 80s and 90s, you get a sense of what a certain kind of person, probably the kind of person who read Variety and considered themselves showbiz literate, even if they weren't actually in showbiz. You'll get a sense of what movies they thought needed to be punished and what stars.
Wait a minute. Are you trying to tell me that the Razzies are not made of the best and brightest working in the industry?
No, you can. Well, folks listening right now, you too can become a member right now.
Wow. How much?
I actually don't.
Probably sound like $100 or something like that.
However, they should be paying you, frankly.
Yes, for participating in whatever they're doing. Oh, wait. I'm looking here. It says that the Razzie for Worst Movie was given to Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, like a no-budget horror film using the Winnie the Pooh IP.
Right. And if it's not
guys.
something like that, it's just the lowest hanging fruit, the most like, oh, did a pop star act in a not very good movie this year? Oh, did, I don't know, Sylvester Stallone, for example, or
they really got it out for Stallone.
Yeah, or somebody who like was kind of did Pauly Shore appear in a movie? Like that's the level of person. That's the level of person that they'll nominate, or like a Kardashian or a Baldwin brother. You know, it's that kind of person.
That's why we're taking the Razzies back. We're making our own categories, giving it out to the people that really deserve it. Right, Will?
Well, if you look at the history of the Razzies, like I wish I could say that. I mean, there's just no point of view there. Like, it would be more interesting, frankly, if they were either more reactionary or more kind of left-wing radical in some way. Like if they were consistently like voting against whoever the Kubrick or the Fassbinder of that year is, they'd be interesting. Or if they were...
Would they be interesting if it's just a contrarian opinion? I think it would be similar.
I guess. All I know is there's no point of view to what it is now. So like when you actually look at the list of movies every year, for the most part, it's just something that's like not very interesting and not even all that bad.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking here at the first 5 years, and the winners of Worst Movie of the Year were 1980, Can't Stop the Music, the Village People musical. Okay, I guess. You know, it's not very good.
It's not very good.
And then 1981, Mommy Dearest. That's fun.
Oh, I don't know. I kind of like Mommy Dearest, yeah.
And then we get a bunch of rough years here. 1982, Incan? About the battle.
That was a weird like vanity project for a cult leader. It's been completely forgotten, but at the time it was
directed by James Bond himself, Terrence Young.
That's right. Okay, and it is actually kind of funny looking at some of these like long forgotten ceremonies, because you'll see star vehicles for people who are sort of like 1983 Pia Zadora,
The Lonely Lady.
Or 1984, Bo Derek, Bolero. This is another thing about the Razzies. There's a strong, like, smack of sexism to a lot of their awards, too. It's like if ever there's, if ever there's a Lady Gaga type who acts in a movie, or, well, Megan Fox, if ever there's somebody who's like a slightly disreputable starlet, you can definitely feel like that. How dare this bitch act?
Like in 1990, they're going after Bo Derek's Ghost Can't Do It. It's like she suffered enough.
Stop. She's already dead.
Or 1992's Shining Through. I don't even know what that is. Michael Douglas, Melanie Griffiths, Liam Neeson, directed by David Seltzer. All right.
Or yeah, sometimes they'll give it to, and they have no taste whatsoever, so all these are indistinguishable, just like big, really expensive runaway productions that are like famous flops. So, and again, that might be Heaven's Gate, that might be Ishtar, that might be Wild Wild West, that might be Battlefield Earth. Like those.
And those are all on the same level.
Exactly.
For us, as well as the Razzies.
So, I mean, Ishtar and Battlefield Earth are two of the, like, crown jewels of the Criterion retrospective. They're kind of exhibit A in the case of, like, the Razzies and society being wrong. Because those are movies that have been reclaimed as subversive. Heaven's Gate, a left-wing response to the Western genre. Ishtar, an irreverent look at American foreign policy. Both movies that won largely because they went wildly over budget and had megalomaniac directors.
How dare they? To which I say, who cares?
Exactly.
Who cares?
Did you pay for it?
Like, and you know who gets paid? Well, most of the time, the people working on it. I say that as I realize, no, it's the executives who get paid the millions and millions of dollars.
Well, it's funny. Like nowadays, it feels like every week there's a movie like The Flash that just like also went $200 million over budget and also
yeah, but it's all right up there on screen, Will.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
All right, so we picked a few of the movies that are on this Criterion list. Let's talk about them, and I think it would be interesting to talk about them from the perspective of why were they chosen as a Razzie or viewed by the public at large as a failure of a film. And if we're doing these in chronological order, let's start with William Friedkin's Cruising. Now, I don't believe this won any awards.
That's an interesting year, too, because it's the first year, and it's also the year that Stanley Kubrick and Brian De Palma were nominated for Worst Director. I don't think they ever had another year like this. Also nominated this year was Xanadu, which is included in the Criterion retrospective. Gotta say, maybe some of you listening like it. I think it's horrible.
I love the songs from Xanadu. I do not like that movie, though. I like the musical numbers. Everything else is, to me, death, and I love musicals.
I mean, even the musical numbers are pretty ineptly directed. He just plops the camera down. It's awful.
We also have Friday the 13th. Yeah, okay, it was a huge success. You can, bring it out. The Jazz Singer, the Neil Diamond remake of the classic film directed by Richard Fleischer. And The Nude Bomb, which is a Don Adams comedy.
Yeah, it's the feature film version of Get Smart, believe it or not.
That's right. Raise the Titanic. Yeah, a Jason Robards kind of adventure film.
And also one of the more interesting ones, Gordon Willis's, the cinematographer's sole directorial effort, the wildly homophobic thriller Windows. So
I've never seen it.
I saw it once, like 15 years ago. I saw it screened, and Bruce LaBruce introduced it, of all people.
Wow.
And it's bad, but it's sort of interesting. It's got the Gordon Willis look to it.
And we forgot The Formula, which is a John J. Avildsen picture that I've never heard of, starring Marlon Brando and George C. Scott, as well as Saturn III, the Stanley Donen. Kirk Douglas is still a very young man, and he can still act like an action star science fiction picture.
So I assume that Cruising and Windows are both on this list because, well, obviously they were very well-publicized fiascos, but also they were initially greeted as very homophobic films. Funnily enough, now, of course, the Razzies gets in the way of its own progressive instincts by giving Worst Picture to Can't Stop the Music, starring the Village People. So they're capable of a little homophobia too. But nevertheless, Cruising, I mean, this was a notorious film in its day. There were protests before, during, and after its production. So many protests, in fact, that when it was filming around Greenwich Village, well, pretty much every scene of the movie is dubbed later because there were loud protests outside the filming locations.
It makes it feel like an Italian crime film because everyone is dubbed and they sound dubbed.
Yeah, so Cruising, a lot of you listening probably know Cruising.
I don't think it's like a beit mozzi anymore. Most people are like, yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, I've had a long time kind of coming around on this movie because I think it was really only on this viewing when I started to fully embrace all of the movie's flaws as actual virtues. So the plot of the film is there is a killer loose in the gay community in New York, specifically the sort of sadomasochistic S&M underground. The movie's sort of like a giallo. And the police send Al Pacino, a hungry young cop, undercover to investigate.
It's not Al anymore. It's Dunk.
My eyes see a killer.
Yeah, my eyes say the winner is. Well, I gave that way more dramatic weight than Al Pacino did on the Oscars that happened last weekend.
Yeah, that's a reference that's going to date this episode.
Oh. I mean, yeah, when they're listening to this episode in universities 20 years from now, they're going to be like, look up the archives.
So the thing that has always kind of stood in my way about appreciating this movie is as a mystery, it's sort of DOA because...
Well, it is so DOA that, like, it doesn't really ask you to solve the mystery because it's impossible to solve. That it's all internal in Al Pacino's mind. And even then, his character is in some ways a cipher, like a nothing that you're watching going through this, but being sweaty and just affected by everything that he's witnessing.
Right. He is a cipher. And when he goes undercover, much of the movie is just spent with him going from club to club, watching. And there are long, long scenes of just all the leather guys
having a good time.
Having a great time. And
I'm not even being sarcastic. Like, the film, at first, you're like, oh man, this seedy underbelly that we're seeing. But if you just take a moment of any preconceived notions that you would have going in, it's like, yeah, this is the scene. They're doing it. There doesn't seem to be anything that is forced upon any of these people.
So one of the things that kind of got in my way of appreciating this movie and that I now disown this reaction, is I couldn't
like Andrew Sarris going back to watch 2001 while baked, changing your mind.
It's like, okay, Pacino is going to all these clubs and he's just standing around watching, what is his investigation actually? It makes no sense. He's not doing any police work. So I disown that reaction now, even though it's true.
Yes.
And the other thing is, during the killing scenes, famously, Friedkin intersperses shots of anal penetration with the knife going in. And this rubbed people at the time the wrong way. It always kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But now seeing the movie again, maybe because I've seen a few Fred Halstead movies, I realize that that's okay. Like the gaze of the movie, and this movie is all about the Pacino character's gaze as well as Friedkin's gaze. Its gaze is both like curious and questioning and also repelled, but also attracted. And it's never any one thing. It's a very hard movie to locate on the Kinsey spectrum.
Well, like watching this movie, you could take away from it, oh man, Al Pacino being around this scene, seeing all of these gay people. At the end of the movie, it's telling me that it turned him into a killer, as opposed to a reading of the film that, no, Al Pacino's repressed feelings maybe led him down a different path because he cannot deal with the things that he wants to deal with.
And the fact that the movie never tells you exactly what to think, and in fact gives you so little of the Al Pacino character's internal life, actually. Like, there are no big monologues. It's all just in his face. There's so much that you are invited to, read into. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's very powerful.
I think as well that, like, the protests make sense when you understand that this is a wide release film that, reading the script or the novel that it's based on, you can say like, oh, it's just demonizing these people, that like they have no other representation. And I'm speaking again as a white guy that is not gay in 2024, that like this is all that they're going to have. Like some people will experience this and take away from it, oh man, look how, grimy and dark this place looks and the rules. Oh, it's so frightening.
Absolutely. And at this time, sort of queer assimilationist politics was on the ascendance. Like there was a big movement to the sort of like love is love, like we're no different than you. We can be integrated into society comfortably style of queer politics. And this is a movie that's all about like the ungentrified side of it.
Mm-hmm. This is going on in the big cities and there's nothing that you can do about it. And then when you watch the movie and you wonder, all right, so it's not affecting you. Well, like what difference does it make?
Well, also, I mean, this is a movie that like it benefits from 40 or 50 years passing.
Yes, time.
Yeah, because I mean, the AIDS epidemic hadn't happened yet. The kind of New York life that this movie depicts would be, pretty much eradicated within a few years.
I read a long article about someone just a couple of years ago going through like script drafts and things like that of the movie. And it's fascinating to see how they got to this very fractured end result, that like starting from a novel where everything is very mapped out and then ending in a place where everything is questionable. And I think that that's what makes the film succeed watching it today. And you could also bounce off of when you watch it as a William Friedkin, the director of The French Connection and The Exorcist movie Cruising, starring Al Pacino, a very well-known actor. And then you're presented with this opaque and different thing and you don't know how to react to it. And that's why when you watch it now and like Al Pacino being the Cypher character, that's like a perfect way to make a movie like this.
Yeah. And I think its approach to sexuality is never one thing. The characters in this movie or some of them at least, are uncategorizable. And that can be a challenging place to be, particularly with a topic like this that at the time, and I guess still is, like a topic that affects a lot of people's lives and is really hot button. It's a movie that asks you to embrace ambiguity and even danger.
Except for one thing that this film is not ambiguous about. Cops are bad. They're very bad.
I love that,
it's
actually.
Very clear about
when
that.
you see the Joe Spinell cop show up in the park cruising, I love that.
And he's introduced at the beginning of the movie being like, my wife is doing this to me. She sucks. Then later on you see him cruising cruising, and other than the murders, the only kind of people that are aggressive are the cops that are like beating up witnesses and humiliating them. Things that if you didn't know any better, you would associate with the scene that Al Pacino is going through, but when in reality it's mostly shown as a pleasurable thing that people are approaching each other and through the codes that the film presents and stuff like that. But listen, if I've just got my bucket of popcorn and I'm at the multiplex, I'm a real Will Sloan going, where's the mystery? This makes no sense.
Speaking of sexual ambiguity and movies where penises are also knives and vice versa, why don't we talk a little bit about the definitely artiest, the most auteurist film in this collection, Rainier Werner Fassbinder's swan song, Querelle.
Now, Criterion, this one's a bit of a stretch because I went looking like, what was this nominated for? Oh, best song and best music, and you get to put it up on the Razzie Awards category.
Yeah, I wish I'd seen that before I watched it because I would have paid much more attention to the music, which I thought was good, by the way.
Yeah, I thought it was good. This feels like it's such an odd film to highlight because it is an international production, even though it's in English, and that it was lambasted on its release, but it's a Fassbender movie. It's like he did this dozens and dozens of times up till this point, his last film. Why this one?
Well, something that's different about it is that it is an international production. It's further away from his usual stable of actors and locations in Berlin. As well, it's, I think, even by his standards, a pretty, well, I mean...
extravagant?
I was going to say difficult to penetrate or...
well, not everything. What a choice of words, Will.
Actually, no, I would say for some viewers, uningratiating, but then for other viewers, probably very ingratiating.
I love reading about this, and there was someone that was like, there's a lot of symbolism in this movie. And it's like, oh, you mean the giant stone penises in the film? Like, well, it's on the poster. It ain't real subtle.
Well, visually, the movie is both like, I mean, incredible, but also hard to digest because it all takes place in this very stylized indoor set with like an orange sky.
Like urine color over everything that you see. Everyone dressed and stylized like Tom of Finland characters.
Yeah, and like the bar and the surrounding area with, yeah, as you say, these big like penis statues and everything. The movie is based on the writings of Jean Genet, but also heavily informed by the whole history of homoerotic art.
I rented this movie hoping for another Franco Nero shoot 'em up, and what am I getting?
Well, Franco Nero plays the lieutenant of a boat that docks in the French port city of Brest, and he is the only unambiguously gay character in the film. The title character, Querelle, played by Brad Davis, is a sexy sailor.
Of Midnight Run fame.
That's right. He's a thief. The main hub of the action is this bar that's also a brothel. It's run by the husband and wife team of Nono and Lisanne, who's played by Jean Moreau. She's having an affair with Querelle's brother, Roger, and the action really kicks in when Querelle murders in cold blood his accomplice during a drug deal. And then, as a sort of act of self-flagellation afterwards, he offers himself up to Nono, the owner of the bar, to get Rogered in the backside.
And this is all presented in a linear and easy to follow way, right, Will?
Oh, yes. I mean... also about the film's visual style, like there's so much information on the screen. The characters are sort of drifting through the movie as if in this like choreographed ballet. It's sometimes hard to keep everyone apart. It's sometimes too hard to follow the cause and effect action of the film, as well as the emotional content of the film, even by Fassbinder standards, is pretty punishing.
Yes, it is a miserable experience throughout, which is only heightened by the fact that it looks so dreamy and expressionist, which is something that Fassbinder always raced after, like imitating that Douglas Sirk style. But here it's as extreme as he would ever go.
And I agree with you that it's a miserable experience, but also I think a lot of people listening will say that it's funny, will say that it's beautiful, will say that it's very emotionally powerful, and it is all those things. Much like Cruising, this isn't a movie that prescribes just one reaction. And also, like Cruising, sex in this movie is not simply sex. It is, for the most part, a tool of dominance.
Watching it again, I enjoyed myself. Last time I watched it many years ago was at the end of a Fassbender marathon, and I was like, oh my God, no more, please.
Yeah, this would be a tough one to have at the end of that marathon.
And honestly, look, we're going to put our titles on the line of Important Cinema Club co-host, but I don't think this deserves to be nominated for any Razzies.
I mean, it's a beautiful film, and emotionally, it's an overwhelming film. You know, what it's saying about sexuality, what it's saying about machismo, what it's saying about, you know, just the ways that we can relate to and hurt each other with love, with our bodies, et cetera, and the evolution of the Querelle character who can think of sex only in terms of punishment and self-flagellation towards the end of the movie, trying to find a way out of that. I mean, it's very powerful, and I agree the music should not have been nominated for a Razzie, and I'm glad the Razzie voters had the good taste to not nominate it for Best Picture.
All right, so let's jump to 1986. This was a split year of worst movies of the year. We got Howard the Duck, directed by
Willard Hoyk, I believe.
Yeah, and Gloria Katz. On the Razzies wiki page, they only list Gloria Katz. Oh, I guess because she's the producer. Maybe William Huck is not. I like Howard the Duck. It's very odd that it exists, especially being directed by the filmmakers who gave us Messiah of Evil. But it's an easy punching bag as like, well, that's the worst film of the year. But it was a split decision this year because also you have Under the Cherry Moon, directed by Prince.
This was his follow-up to Purple Rain, and this movie is indicative of some of the things that Razzies do. If stars become really overexposed, also if a vanity project by an overexposed star comes out there and just like really flops hard, they love that.
They love it, even though they don't actually consider, is this vanity project really odd and interesting in that it exists? That's out of their mind. It's just like, how dare they? How dare they? Prince make a 30s style slapstick comedy starring himself that takes place at the French Riviera and is also shot by one of Fassbender's DPs and who would go on to be Martin Scorsese's DP. How dare he? How dare he?
Yeah, and Prince himself, I mean, let's face it, an odd man, a strange looking man.
Unconventional man.
And it's amazing that with Purple Rain, like he just took control and was like, all 4'2" of me, you're going to find incredibly sexy. And I am going to writhe around on the stage and I'm going to shake my fucking hips and I am going to induce an orgasm in you right then and there. And he got away with it. He made it work. And in this movie, it's like the chickens came home to roost. They were like, not going to be fooled again. You can only go so far.
I think mostly because he didn't allow himself to be a rock star in this movie, that he was trying to do something else and people rebelled when they saw it.
And I will say this is a bit of a problem I have with the movie, that there's only like one big musical number.
I agree.
Yeah, which is my favorite part of the movie when he's dancing on the piano. I mean, and the end credits. I mean, goddamn, the man could dance.
But I just think, and he can play guitar too, but like you need to see him live to really rock out on that guitar. And you can feel Prince going, but I want to do something else. I want to be different, even though we're all like, no, we want you to rock.
Yeah, this movie kind of felt to me on this viewing like Prince's Freddie Got Fingered. It sort of takes a certain kind of vanity project, like pop star movie, and takes it to an absurd extreme. And, you know, the opening scene where he's playing the piano and there's this woman watching him and he like induces an orgasm through the power of his piano playing. I was on the movie's side with this scene. I think if you go with that, you'll go with anything that follows.
I do wish it was funnier.
Yeah.
Like, I wish there was more going on.
Yes.
But just the fact that Prince is in this scenario, you'll see a lot of reviews going, well, it doesn't work. Like, it feels odd. That's the point. That's why he's making this.
Yeah.
Like, and that's what's interesting about it.
I do think he's basically in on the joke, at least a lot of the time. I mean, he also thinks he's sexy, which, you know, your mileage may vary. But I also think he thinks it's funny that he's doing a lot of this stuff.
And that it's so beautifully shot by Michael Ballhaus, like every black and white frame. And it was shot shot in color and then changed to black and white for the release version.
And also, Prince himself is still wildly charismatic. And so this movie, you know, there's a lot of mileage that this movie gets from me, and just watching this guy who's a once-in-a-lifetime presence do all of these like wacky, crazy things. I mean, another thing that I like is that in Purple Rain, he's pretty stoic for a lot of the movie, except when he's busting it out on stage. But in this movie, he's full Jerry Lewis for a lot of it.
It's just like really cornballing it up and everything. Giant close-ups of his face being like, no. Love that stuff. Love it. And if I could get a project like this from like a star, like, I don't know if I'm trying to think of who.
Well, any star.
Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
Taylor Swift made like a black and white 30 slapstick comedy that she started. I would go see that. I'd be interested that she directed as well.
What about the new Jennifer Lopez movie, that This Is Me Now thing?
Yeah, I watched 15 minutes of that for something else. Not a fan. It's mostly just a collection of music videos directed by the guy who made the Hitcher remake.
Well, speaking of star vehicles, speaking of overexposed stars, speaking of stars who, you know, it happens. It gets to that point in their career when they've just had one too many hits and they make a movie that's just a little too phoned in, just a little bit riding on past glories, and it's time to take him down.
Tom Green's Freddy Got Fingered, right?
Well, Freddy Got Fingered is probably my favorite movie in the collection.
I know. We can't talk about this because we love it too much, but Freddy Got Fingered rules. I think history has proven it right. I remember reading Tom Green's biography going like, but when I showed this, people loved it. What happened? Like, why did you turn against me? And it's just, Tom, you were too ahead of your time. That's all it was.
Too ahead of his time. And I also just think so many of these movies that win Razzies, it's just like the guy was too overexposed at that moment. It's the movies themselves are just like refracting things that are around in the culture. And at that time, people were fucking tired of seeing Tom Green everywhere. They were tired of him and Drew Barrymore, and they were like, who is this Pauly Shore like character who's shown up on my TV? And now he's like wearing an animal hide. Enough of this.
What's funny about that is, like, how were you exposed to Tom Green? Were you just watching Entertainment Tonight and you're like, I want something? That's the people that are getting angry about like Jennifer Lopez and Ben Affleck, right? They're submitting themselves to these things, and that's what's driving them mad.
Now, a far less abrasive screen presence. In fact, a screen presence who's built to please, Tom Cruise.
Oh, I love Tom Cruise. He always gives it his 100%.
Well, he grins a lot in 1988's Cocktail.
He's got a lot of teeth.
So worst picture, though, 1988, worst picture. Is it that bad?
What else was nominated that year? Caddyshack 2. Oof.
I mean, that's got to be worse. Come on.
Hot to trot.
Mac and Me. Well, that's
Rambo 3.
Mac and Me should have won Best Picture that year, I think.
Yeah, at the Oscars. Yeah, give it to Rambo 3. Give it to
the brave Mujahideen fighters of Afghanistan. Yeah.
So Cocktail, I had surprisingly never seen.
Neither had I.
I mean, I'd seen the tape, which was a huge hit. It gave us the Beach Boys Volume 2 with their song Kokomo and Mike Love, singing it up. I had just read bad reviews about it. The people were like, this is not good.
Yeah, and it doesn't have, it's directed by Roger Donaldson, who, God love him, Dante's Peak.
The evil Martin Campbell.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that like morally or anything, just an opposite of Martin Campbell.
But this was always like kind of the schlocky Tom Cruise movie, and it made a lot of money like all of his movies did at that time. But there was a sense with this movie that, he followed it up with Born on the 4th of July, which was the real start of like prestige Tom.
Yeah, and that feels like a reaction to the success and the expectations of Cocktail. Of like, oh, you're just going to be a, smiling, charming leading man, right?
Right. So this is, the culmination of a run of movies like Days of Thunder, Risky Business, The Color of Money, where like the template of a Tom Cruise movie was he's cocky, he's arrogant, he's wildly charismatic. He has to be a bit humbled in the second act, and then he gets to come back, still cocky, still arrogant, but a bit humbled.
That's right. How could you not say yes to that smiling face? So I start Cocktail. I'm excited. Oh, man. Is Tom Cruise just going to flip some drinks for an hour and a half? He does. And at about like 20 minutes in, I'm like, there's no other tricks here, right? Like, this is the one thing that they do. They flip drinks.
This is the most famous thing about the movie, and also the most ridiculous thing, where it's like, he becomes, a famous, cool bartender because he does like shows. He
Yeah.
He juggles his mixers and stuff. And it's very much like the Werewolves of London scene in The Color of Money, where he's like dancing around the pool table and he's using his pool cue as a nunchuck and all that stuff. But in that movie, the whole point is that he's too much of a hotshot. He needs to calm down a bit. But in this movie, it's like they love it. They love this guy who takes 15 minutes to do a whole dance while he's pouring a drink.
Just pour my goddamn drink.
It's ridiculous because you'd think that somebody who drinks, like, they care about the drink. They don't care about, like, I don't care how you make it. I don't care how you mix it. Just give me a drink that tastes good.
I was surprised to see that the co-star of this film is Australia's own Brian Brown, who's literally
not bad.
He's fine. Well, I associate him with like Ozploitation pictures because and of course FX 1 and 2, directed by Australia's own Richard Franklin. But it was nice to see him rubbing shoulders with Tom Cruise in this film. The thought that kept going through my mind as I was watching this was, do you think Tom Cruise ever talks to anybody that he worked on this film with?
That would be so funny if he did. I mean, maybe he runs into Roger Donaldson at functions. Who knows?
Please, can I have another job?
So the plot of this movie is that Tom Cruise has just gotten out of the service. He's a working class boy from Queens, and he takes the bus into the big city, New York, the Big Apple, to become a famous bartender. He wants to create a chain of bars that recapture that New York feeling. And in one of the movie's...
God, hell, no thank you.
Well, in one of the movie's funniest scenes, during his like business course, where they all have to submit their business proposals to the teacher just like gratuitously like insults all of them. He's just like, and you, Mr. Cruise, you want to have a bar. Who likes bars? You're a fool. You know, I thought that character was
I thought that scene ruled.
Bit of a straw man, you know?
Being like, does he do this every class? Like, is it this bad every time?
But yes, he has an older mentor who teaches him the ways of bartending.
Brian Brown.
But they also fall out over a woman played by Gina Gershon.
I could not believe how much a period of time this film stretched across, like years. It takes place over years.
I know. So after the falling out, he goes to Jamaica for 3 years to hone his craft as a humble bartender. And that's where he meets Elizabeth Shue, who, for this point on, the movie becomes a love triangle between
Brian Brown, Tom Cruise, and Elizabeth Shue.
Brian Brown tells him, you gotta get with a rich woman who can fund your bar dream. So he finds a rich woman, but then he loves Elizabeth Shue. And then it turns out, spoiler, turns out Elizabeth Shue's also rich. So hey.
Oh, wow. It all works out at the end of the day. I love when he finally confronts Elizabeth Shue and goes, listen, I slept with that older woman. I did leave with her and we started a relationship in New York, but I had to sleep with her. My friend bet me about it. I can't turn down a bet. And it's like, Elizabeth Shue, drop this loser. Get out of here. Get.
So of the 4 movies that we watched for this episode, far and away the least interesting one, I think. Why do you think it's in this collection? What do you think people would get out of this theoretically?
Well, why it was nominated for a Razzie, like you said, I think people were tired of Tom Cruise. Like that's basically, and it was a huge hit too. So it's like, oh, just overexposure. No, thank you. I think it was picked because it's a popular film that people may know of but have not seen. So you can put it in that collection, and Criterion's like, I hope nobody watches it because then they'll see it and be like, it's not that interesting, other than a representation of kind of 80s excess and like, you know, the capitalist dream, going for it, settling down, starting a family, being happy with what you can get.
Yeah, all of the sort of aesthetics of the 80s this movie has, and people like Tom Cruise now, so it has him in pure uncut form.
I would have loved if Criterion could have done like a little video essay with every one of these movies, like contextualizing it, why it would have been nominated for a Razzie, what value does it have now. And it's a real shame they didn't.
Boy, it'd be nice if they could hire some people who could do something like that. Wouldn't it?
And Mr. Criterion is sitting back going, why would we hire you when you suckers are doing it for free?
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, this movie, I guess it's nostalgic for the people who it's nostalgic for. And it's sadly indicative, I think, of some of the programming flaws in this collection.
Do you think we'd have a Roger Donaldson episode in us? looking at his filmography. People say that his earlier films were interesting, like Sleeping Dogs, Smash Palace.
No Way Out was a big critical hit when it came out. I think maybe there's a Donaldson.
But like Cadillac Man, the Robin Williams, Tim Robbins comedy, The World's Fastest Indian, The Recruit, 13 Days. Does that still have value in some way?
I doubt it. Hey, maybe. I would rather do
The November Man?
I would rather... Oh, yeah, the November Man, definitely. We should do a Pierce Brosnan episode.
Oh, we should absolutely do a Pierce Brosnan episode.
But I would, just faced with the journeyman directors, I would much rather do Martin Campbell. There's more stuff in there that I like.
Well, so that's it. We finally roasted the Razzies. And let's close the book on them like Alanis Morissette's closing the book on the View Askew-niverse.
Yep, we killed them. So, Justin... do we have any letters this week?
We do have letters, and as per usual, you can send them to us at importantcinemaclubpodcast@gmail.com.
And we're going to revive another novelty movie brand from the 90s by rating all of your letters in terms of bombs, like Mr. Cranky did.
What is Mr. Cranky?
You remember Mr. Cranky? He was a website in the 90s who his gimmick was he disliked all movies, and he would review movies from 1 bomb to 5 bombs. 5 bombs being the worst, I guess.
I never stumbled upon that website. Was it big? Like, how did you know about it?
Yeah, it was like, I remember I saw it because in like Video Hound, the like 1998 volume, where he, of course, rated movies on a scale of bones, there was a section at the back that was like notable websites. And he would recommend websites, badmovies.org, James Berardinelli, all the guys.
What do you think Mr. Cranky's doing these days? He's got a right-wing website now. That's what he writes about.
I think we should have him on the show. See if he maybe he's gone the opposite way. Maybe he's like, in the age of Trump, I feel it's irresponsible to be cranky.
All right, so our first letter's from Ash, and they go, "Hey guys, love the show, long-time listener, first-time caller. As an LGBT fan of the Important Cinema Club, we ship Will and Justin." Just kidding. "I've really appreciated you introducing me to some queer filmmakers I was unaware of, such as Arthur J. Bresson Jr., Andy Milligan, and the amazing David Dakota." Man, we haven't mentioned David Dakota's name in a long time, so I'm glad a letter writer can bring it back up again.
I also like him being positioned here as a queer filmmaker, which he absolutely is.
Absolutely
And he
is.
deserves to be in that canon.
I wondered if you guys had considered doing episodes on other LGBT filmmakers. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the films of Derek Jarman or Greg Araki, or just an episode on more mainstream LGBT cinema generally. It's always interesting to me to hear the response of straight people to queer art, as it's often marketed to and consumed by overwhelmingly queer audiences. And it's good to know that the themes and ideas expressed by queer artists can be appreciated universally. Keep up the good work, Ash.
Can we actually put Derek Jarman on the fast track? I would really like to do an episode on him.
Yeah, Blue.
Wittgenstein.
Yep. Derek Jarman is one of those guys that like when I go in fully, I feel like I'll never go out. He has written like 100 journals that I always see on the shelf being like, "Oh, Jarman, once you got me, you're never going to let go, are you?"
Yeah, to answer your question, Jarman, Araki, those are definitely filmmakers we would like to do. I'd also like to do a Bruce LaBruce episode at some point. I feel like we've been tossing that around for literally years and we haven't got around to it.
What is Bruce LaBruce still making movies? Probably.
Yeah,
right?
he's making movies. I'm a bit behind on him, but he's out there.
Well, thank you very much for the letter. And our next one is from Alex Grindley. And he goes, "Hey, Justin and Will. My question topic suggestion for today is, have you considered doing episodes exploring some Black British directors? As far as I know, this isn't something you've explored before, but please do correct me if I'm wrong. I realized recently after watching Isaac Julian's Young Soul Rebels that beyond contemporary directors like Steve McQueen, I knew very little about Black British film history and wanted to remedy that a little bit. I've been enjoying this exploration, but from looking on Letterboxd, I've been quite surprised at how low the number of logs are for a lot of films. It feels like they deserve and would be appreciated by a wider audience. Egg Horace Ove's Pressure, often cited as the first Black directed British feature film, and is really interesting film in its own right, only to have 1.5 logs. It seems like the work of many of the earlier Black British directors working in the 70s and 90s are pretty unknown outside the UK, so it would be great to see you touch on them at some point and hear your thoughts on filmmakers like Horace Ove, Isaac Julian, Ngozi Orura, and John Akamfra. Plus, his work with the Black Audio Film Collective are some filmmakers who might lend themselves to important Cinema Club treatment if this was a topic you wanted to explore in the future. Thanks again, and keep up the excellent work. All the best, Alex.
Well, I'd be very interested in this, and I'd also be interested in hearing what are the good books or articles on the subject of Black British filmmaking, because I feel like we have a fairly good handle on like the history of, or at least, you know, the basic history of like African American filmmaking and the social conditions that was responding to, but not so much Black British filmmaking. So I would love to know any resources you might have.
And I think we'd probably dedicate an episode to each filmmaker separately. I don't think we do like one catch-all in that way, even though looking at these names, there are not many that I recognize. So like the letter writer, I am unfamiliar with their work. So thank you very much for that letter. And again, you can email us at importantcinemaclubpodcast@gmail.com.
So we are on Patreon, of course, and we're going to figure out what the Patreon episode is very soon. But you've got years and years of content there, and we encourage you to come on board.
Patreon.com/The Important Cinema Club.
But the big plug on this episode is Justin and I are doing an audio commentary for Film Master's beautiful new Blu-ray release of one of the greatest kung fu movies of all time. Well, one of the oddest kung fu movies.
Yeah, people who may not be very well versed, maybe a little bit more context would be appreciated.
Yeah, one of the strangest kung fu movies of all time, a movie called The Crippled Masters from 1979. This is a movie that is exactly what it sounds like. It stars a man who doesn't have full arms, and it stars another man who didn't have use of his legs. And they join forces, literally join forces, and become a kung fu fighting machine.
And so we're doing a commentary for the Blu-ray label Film Masters, who have made it kind of their log line to take public domain films and just do amazing remasters of them. I know that this one, they have been like remastering it for months. You can actually find clips of like the before and after on YouTube.
Yeah, this is a movie that exists in many very bad versions. And it's also a movie that, I mean, I'm very excited to work on this because it's a movie that, listen, folks, it's a thorny film. It's a problematic film.
Some would call it an exploitation film.
And I think it's a movie that really benefits from context, and it has an amazing history behind it. So we're really excited to get into that.
So you can check out that Blu-ray and purchase a copy for yourself at wherever Blu-rays are sold. Diabolic DVD will probably have it in stock, so I would probably recommend going there. I should say Filmmaster releases very reasonably priced, especially for the amount of work and the amazing extras they always have included on their discs. This is their first martial arts film that they're doing. Wait, maybe when they were the Film Detective, they did Fist of Fear, Touch of Death, but like this is their first pure martial arts film, if you will.
Yeah. So what are we doing on the podcast next week, Justin?
Next week, we are going to be doing horror master Michael Soavi, the director of Cemetery Man, The Sect, The Church, and a few other ones that you've probably never heard of, because Michael Soavi, while he worked with all the greats as second unit directors, assistant directors like Joe D'Amato, Dario Argento, when he finally got his chance to direct movies, it was on the tail end of Italy having a like horror boom. So like his films are a beautiful example of like someone who learned everything that has come before finally being able to put them in effect, because he clearly loves making these kind of movies as opposed to perhaps other filmmakers who did it out of necessity. And then his career basically ended when he was as strong as he ever could be. So we'll be watching Cemetery Man. I recommend The Church. And maybe we'll watch, he did a crime film in the 2000s that I don't know if I can find a copy. I remember watching it many years ago, but it's probably accessible in some form. So that's what we will be checking out. So until next week, my name's Justin DeClue.
I'm Will Sloan.
Thanks for listening. As per usual, I would like to thank some of our new patrons, who include Lucas Barwinchik, Seamus Turner Glennon, Ken Nichols, Dylan Mumm, Carrie Champion, and Joshua Tarkala. Thank you very much for becoming patrons. We could not keep doing this without you. Well, your fever's died down, Will. You can go back to your normal life. the Oscars are over.
Did you watch it this year, Justin?
I did indeed.
What do you...
Did you watch the On Cinema On Oscars special?
Oh, yeah. I mean, my Oscar ritual for the last, I guess, 10 years has been watching the Oscars and then the next morning watching the On Cinema special, which I thought was very strong this year.
Well, the Oscars themselves, I watched it with Emily for the first time in 15 years. We're watching it through like the Roku City TV app, so we weren't chasing down weird streams online that kept breaking. And it was fine. There were like no real surprises, in my opinion. I was not invested in anything except for Godzilla, which won. And I was very happy about that.
Yeah, I was happy about that. And I mean, if it didn't win, because that's the thing. It truly... It's funny when you look at like the last 20 years of Best Picture winners or like anything since the year 2000, it is an absolute, for the most part, it's an absolute graveyard, like...
Well, Parasite, there's some weird ones like Everything Everywhere All at Once or even The Shape of Water. Remember that one Best Picture?
Yeah, I do remember The Shape of Water vaguely. Well, No Country for Old Men is probably the best from this century, right?
Yep. Coda.
Yeah, Coda.
A movie that
I didn't see it.
Does not exist.
I've never.
No, I didn't see it either. No one did.
What won this year? Oh, yeah, Oppenheimer. Yeah, what do you think of that?
Yeah.
Good movie. Yeah.
Yep. Am I going to like passionately defend it in any way, shape, or form? No. Like, its director, who also won Best Picture, Christopher Nolan. If you misspell a name in Letterboxd, his name will come up with Steven Spielberg. So I think he's doing okay in those regards.
What did you think of the thing they brought back, like actors, like doing...
Awful.
Yeah, the actors, please, just presenting, doing little testimonial speeches for all the nominees.
I hated it. Get it over. Just keep moving.
Awful. So embarrassing. I mean, actors need to be stopped. You don't see like the technical awards people doing like embarrassing canned ham shenanigans like this. Like actors,
this actor is so amazing. They're so good, and that's why the star of Naiad deserves her award.
The technical people just get on stage and they're really awkward and they read off their little piece of paper and they go off. But actors get on stage and they're crying. They're doing full theatrics. I don't know.
Yeah, Emma Stone. That was the big upset of the night.
Yeah, and again, had I a ballot, I would have voted for Lily Gladstone. But also, who cares?
Do you think it was a reaction to she's clearly not best actor, she's best supporting, which is why I'm going to vote for Emma Stone?
So maybe, but I also think, what do we know about the Oscars? They like big performances. They like showy performances. Yes. They don't typically honor the more internalized performances. So Poor Things, which she's very good in, you definitely see the work.
Yeah, it's right up there on screen. Some people may even call it a little weird. You know what? I think I agree with everybody. Oscars should have no host. It should just be the people come out, they say the award, they give it away. That's all I want to say.
And no speeches, too. It should be...
No, speeches are fine. Speeches should be 10 minutes long. I want to hear their publicist names. I want to hear all those other things, too.
I mean, the biggest thing is...
Give them more rope to hang themselves with. That's what I want to hear.
I mean, the most infuriating thing is always that they put the Lifetime Achievement Awards to that other ceremony, the Governor's Awards.
Yeah, that's the people I want to see.
I know, and I feel like everybody loves those. I mean, those are some of the best Oscar moments. That's Charlie Chaplin coming over after 20 years and getting his standing ovation.
Do you miss like all the film montages that were not included this year? There weren't many. I don't think there was any.
There was one for the stuntmen. You remember that?
Oh, that was infuriating because that's like, oh, they're going to like announce a stunt category, right? Like they did with the best ensemble casting. Oh, no, they're not. They're just going to say, hey, stuntman, you're pretty good. All right, let's move on.
Actually, the funniest thing this year was the death montage, the in memoriam, where
it's like all these people and then miscellaneous.
Yeah, they had a screen where they just put 50 names on it and you could...
Oh, wait, I see Kenneth Anger at the top.
Yeah, you couldn't even see it. And that's so funny. It's like worse than not getting in the montage is being put on the like etc. slide. The like, we'll acknowledge you, but not that much.
I just get rid of that in memoriam thing. Like all it does is make people miserable. I don't think it helps anybody. And having worked in an in memoriam capacity at the Canadian Screen Awards, it's like people have to submit their name to get in it. Like it doesn't usually just get done automatically. And get every non-actor or director or screenwriter or producer off of those like an executive. Screw off. What are you doing in this in memoriam segment?
I completely agree. Actually, they should make this a separate show, you know? Instead of the Governor's Awards, they should have the in memoriam show where it could be
everyone dresses in black.
Yeah, it could be 2 hours and you get to see like clips of the movies and stuff. Yeah, I think it'd be great.
Do you think people would watch that, Will?
I would. And you know what else I miss about the in memoriam is back in the 90s, people would applaud. So you could get to see who they loved the most. You get to see who won the in memoriam.
Wow, the 2024 Oscar ratings, it drew 19.5 million viewers. So it actually went up from last year.
Yeah, still not that great compared to the glory days, huh?
No, but the internet wasn't around back then to distract all the youth who otherwise would be forced to watch the Oscars and be invested if Dances with Wolves would win. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. The Oscars had happened. I liked that it started an hour earlier.
Oh, yeah. And the show itself was pretty breezy, I thought, you know? Like, what were we done at like 10 o'clock? It was great.
It's just the actors giving speeches to other actors. No, thank you. Ah, man, Naiad. Such a funny series of a movie that does not exist other than the fact that Netflix willed it into award ceremony.
Speaking of Naiad, can I say how angry I was, how furious that Annette Bening did not bring Warren Beatty as her date?
Dressed as Dick Tracy?
When I look at the audience, I want to see...
I thought you were going to be like, I was furious at Jonathan Glazer's speech that minimized...